Hey there, friends. It's Bill MacDonald. Welcome to Common Sense. Come on into the Common Sense math room where we see, say, hear, listen, think, do, write, and sometimes even get to use the sense of taste and smell because we're going to be talking about cake today. Fractions. Part one is going to be just about fractions and how you figure out how to take a fraction that's written in word form, two of them actually, and change them into fractions that have a numerator and a denominator, what's also known as a dividend and a divisor, a fraction part divided by a fraction whole. So after part one is finished, I'm going to help some of you in secondary, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, how to go from a fraction to a decimal so we can learn how to multiply the decimal times the number of pieces of cake. That way we can see what decimal portion, and it's going to be the same answer. Then we'll take it a step further and say, well, once you figure out a decimal, how do you move from a fraction to a decimal to a percent? And it's sort of like taking a piece of paper and say, how do I take one thing and turn it into a fraction? Well, fraction, you divide things, okay, to make fractions. And then when you divide things, you'll end up getting whole numbers and decimals. And in this case, because we're using proper fractions, we're going to get decimals that are less than 1. And then you'll take that decimal, and when we go to part 2 and learn how to move the decimal 2 places to the right to figure out what is if this decimal is right here, what is the percent? Well, percent would be how many out of 100? We'll just move the decimal 2 places to the right. So basically we're saying fraction, decimal, percent. And a lot of it comes down to fold the paper, fraction, decimal, percent. So let's take a look at it so that you can see part one, the hard part. And this is going to be specifically to help students learn how to take a problem. Problems have periods, and be able to answer a question when no numbers are written anywhere on the problem or the question. Half of the students and an entire state in May were not able to get a question like this one correct. So how do you help kids find the numbers when they're only words? The shaded part, there's shaded, unshaded, of the model below represents the combined come together right now. So we're going to put Bill, Chris, and Dan all together to combine to make this shaded portion of what seems to be a cake. Here comes the first fraction in word form. Bill ate 1/4. So in words, 1 numerator, 4 denominator, 1 dividend, 4 divisor, 1 fraction part, 4 fraction whole. So 1/4 out of all of this cake, including the unshaded, because we're talking about the entire cake, not the cake apart from the, take a whole thing, a whole cake. So a whole piece of paper. Chris ate half of the cake, half of. So half means 1 numerator divided by 2 denominator. 1 dividend divided by 2 divisor. Huh. One fraction part, huh, divided by two fraction whole. So as soon as your kids can see the word half, they need to remind their brain to take a picture of 1/2, and 1/4 is 1/4. Of is a very important thing in math. 1/2 is going to help us because the question down below is going to ask us about what fraction that Dan ate. So as soon as we can figure out what these guys ate, I can already see that if I just sit there counting, once I've done this first part, I'll be able to, we're going to get to the point where we know that Dan ate 5 out of the 40 pieces, but we have to get there first. The unshaded is the not eaten part. They're not asking us about that, but that has to be part of the whole because the whole cake has 40 pieces, 10, 20, 30, 40. So how do you take 1/4 of a whole cake? How do you take 1/4 of 40 pieces? Of means times. So 1/4 times 40. 40 times 1 is 40 in the numerator, dividend, divided by the 4 that's in the denominator, divisor. 40 divided by 4 equal parts equals 10. So that means that Bill ate 10 of the 40 pieces. That's the 1/4. So when we come over here, oh, there's 10 of the 40 pieces right there. So we'll separate Bill's portion, Bill's proportion, Bill's fraction, 10 out of the 40. Those are now designated for Bill. Chris ate 1/2 of the 40. Of means times. 1/2 times 40 means 1 times 40 divided by 2 is 20. So Chris ate 20 out of the 40. That would be half of the cake. And so there's Chris's 2 rows if we make it in picture form. So that means that portion is what's left. So Dan has the 5 out of 40, not out of 35. So that's where some of your kids probably went wrong if they were able to get to this part. It's 5 out of the entire cake because it says of the cake, not of the eaten portion. Okay. So 5 out of 40 is 5 in the numerator, dividend, divided by 40 in the divisor, denominator, part whole. And we'll use a division property of equality that whatever we divide on the top, because 5 is divisible by 5, 5 divided by 5 is equal to 1, and 40 divided by into 5 equal parts is equal to 8. So in reduced form, since 5/40 was not there, you can either do the cross multiplication if you want to, and say, and we can kind of check that. What is 40 times 1? 40. What is 8 times 5? 40. But if you don't believe in that, well, just divide both sides, the numerator and the denominator, by the same number, by the same value, and you will get the reduced fraction of 1/8. So the answer is 1/8 of the cake was eaten by Dan. An extension beyond the problem a little bit. If you want to ask them, okay, well, what fraction was not eaten? Well, the same fraction that Dan ate, 5/40, 1/8, is the fraction that was not eaten. Now, that's all of part 1. For those of you that are just trying to figure out how to turn words into fractions and use those fractions to kind of look at a picture and be able to do multiplication and division of the total pieces that you're aware of. So part 2 is to say, how do I change for the higher grades a fraction, which you see there, Bill's 1/4, Chris's 1/2, and Dan's 1/8. how do you change a fraction to a decimal to figure out the same answer that we got just doing times 40? So, and then I'll show you how to get to percent after that, fraction, decimal, percent. So Bill, one whole cake divided into 4 equal parts, 1 and nothing else. So we put a decimal there. So there's the decimal in the same place, lining up the decimal. 4 does not go into 1, but 0 and 25 hundredths is the same thing as 25 hundredths, just for those of you that are not aware. 4 times 2 is equal to 8. You multiply until we get to the number we're looking for inside the dividend box or less. Subtract 8, we get a remainder of 2. We drop and go back to the top, drop the 0, and then we go back to the top and multiply 4 until we get to our new product that we're trying to find. 4 times 5 is equal to 20. So we have a remainder of 0. So how do I put that over here in decimal form? It's 0.25 or 25 hundredths. So what is 25 hundredths? 25 hundredths of 40. Well, what's 25 times 4? 100. There's your 100. And you add your 0, you get 1,000. And when you're multiplying with decimals, because the decimal is 1, 2 places to the left, you move the decimal 1, 2 places to the left. So our friend Bill's portion of the cake is 10 out of the 40 pieces is 25 hundredths. What is 25 hundredths in percent? How much out of 100? Percent. Bill ate 25% of the cake. Let's try it with Chris. All right. Take your fraction, your whole cake, and divide it into 2 equal parts. 2 cannot go into 1. 0 and 5/10 our final answer. Our quotient, the answer when we divide. 0 and 5/10 is the same thing as 5/10. So we multiply 2 times something to make 10, which would be 5. The product of 5 and 2 is 10. You subtract the 10, we have a remainder of 0. So our decimal, fraction to decimal, you divide. And so there's our decimal. There's our 5/10, 0 and 5/10. So 5/10 of 40 is the same thing as 50 hundredths. Okay. So what is 40 times 5 is 200. 40 times 5, and then you have a 0, or 5 times 4 is 20, and we have 2 zeros. So either way that you look at it, you can just look at the numbers with the multiplication of 0 shortcut. 5 times 4 is 20, add the 2 zeros, and then we move it 1, 2 places to the right. And so 50 hundredths of 40 is 20 pieces out of the 40 pieces of cake. And what is 50 hundredths in percent? Percent, we move the decimal. So 50 hundredths is the same thing as 50%, 50%. Last one, for those of you that are wanting to practice changing fractions to decimals to percents, what is 1 whole piece of cake divided into the 8, the denominator, the divisor, the fraction whole that we found out that Dan had. 8 goes into 10 one time. with a product of 8. We subtract the 8 to get a remainder of 2. Drop the 0. When you drop, go back to the top. So we say now 8 times something else to make 20 or less. 8 times 2 is equal to 16. Subtract 16 from 20, we get a remainder of 4. We have to drop. So since we're dropping the 0, when you drop, go back to the top. Now I do 8 times my last number to make 40 or less. 8 times 5 is 40. And we finally get that remainder of 0. So basically it's 0 and 125 thousandths. For those of you in the upper grades, what does that look like? 0 and 125 thousandths. Okay. And so when you're saying, well, what is 125 thousandths of 40? Well, what's 125 times 4? 500. And then you add your 0. And then you say, okay, well, if the 0 is here where the decimal is, let's find out how many places we had to move it over. Nothing here, because it's 40 and nothing else. But if we have the decimal over here, it's 1, 2, 3 positions. So you move 1, 2, 3 positions. So 5 out of the 40 pieces is what we saw in the picture. And what does that mean? 125 hundred thousandths in decimal form per cent changed to percent. You just move it twice. So it's 12, what some of you would say 0.5%, 12 and 5/10, or 12.5%, or what some of you might say 12 and 1/2%. So those are the that was what I would call part 2 for some of you that are trying to teach kids how to not just figure out fractions, but how to change fractions to decimals to multiply it a different way, a decimal portion of the whole number 40. And then if you're needing to, what is that decimal in percent form? So hope you like that. We were helping kind of 5th graders, 4th graders, because that was a readiness problem for Texas. And hopefully the decimals and the percent kind of gave some of you guys in the upper grades some ideas. Fraction, decimal, percent, fold D paper, and it kind of helps your kid when you divide, you get the decimal. When you move the decimal to the right, you get the percent. So God bless you guys. Have a great day. Please share the video with one of your math teacher friends. I'm wearing my cap today because I went golfing and I was too lazy to take off my cap. So you got to see me from a different perspective today. You guys take care. God bless. And I suggest you have a piece of cake or a cupcake or some form of cake for those kids who do all of the strategies and learn how to take a cake and put it into fractional portions, proportions, ratios. God bless.